It's no secret that I love sharing ideas for journal spreads, but while I've shared hundreds of layout ideas, most of them can be set up using 5 simple page structures. These 5 layout designs can be used to make over 20 pages for your journal, so let's have a look. The journal we're using is from Tiefossi, who is the kind sponsor of this video, but more on them in a second. Our first layout structure sees us splitting the spread into 12 separate sections. This is done by having 3 run along the top of each page and 3 run along the bottom, so 6 per page for 2 pages gives us 12 boxes. In terms of the spacing, each of those boxes is 4 centimeters across by 9 centimeters down, or in terms of dot grid boxes, that's 8 across by 18 down. This gives us an individual space between each of those boxes going horizontally, and 2 spaces or 1 centimeter between the top boxes and the bottom boxes. Given the fact that there are 12 boxes on this layout, you can probably hazard a guess as to what this one's going to be used for. This is a great layout style that you can use to capture information on a yearly time frame. Typically, in looking at a layout like this one, you could think of this as a future log where you capture future tasks, events, appointments, anything like that. And while that is the way that I would typically use a layout like this, there are also other ways we can use it too. This structure of layout gives us plenty of space to write in things for each of the months of the year. You can expand this layout a little bit so that you don't have 3 and 3, but maybe 2 and 2, just if you need a little bit more writing space. But for this structure in particular, what you could do is use it as a future log. So that would be by writing out all of your tasks, events, appointments, and just putting those in a bulleted list that runs down each of the boxes. I've used different colors here to indicate different types of tasks or events. So maybe yellow are things like holidays, this kind of peachy tone could be for social events, and then a blue for kind of life admin tasks. But if you capture that kind of information on your calendar, you don't really need it in your journal as well. You could use this one specifically as a birthday and anniversary log. The actual style of filling this one in looks kind of similar. You've again just got a list of that information, and I've used color coding again, this time using the different colors to represent different people. So a peachy tone for family members, a yellow marker for colleagues, and then the blue color for friends. Depending on how many people you have to record for, you might need more space, but you can use a layout like this to do that. Another way that you can use this style of layout though is just for journaling about the month. So this can effectively be used as a memory keeper. In each of the boxes, you just write a little summary for what went on in the month, maybe any kind of special memories that you have, thoughts, feelings, anything like that. Rather than writing this one out as a list, I've just done it as kind of a smaller snippet of long form journaling. When it comes to using layouts that act as a summary for a full year though, I do very much prefer to have mini calendars to show where each of the days fall on in terms of which day of the week. This one could be used as a schedule, say for work or for school, anything like that. Essentially just making the top half of the box the mini calendar, and then the space underneath this to record what the specific markings mean. Being a fan of color coding, I've used it again here, so you can color code your events based on kind of recurring events and giving them specific colors. And then for anything that isn't recurring, it's more of a one-off, you can just circle the date and then list it at the bottom. If you're going to set up and use a layout like this one in your journal, you don't have to write your information on separate little pieces of paper and stick it in. I just wanted to only have to set up the layout once and show you how you could use it for the various examples we have here. As said, I really like to have a reference for what day of the week each day of the month or year falls on. So our next layout structure is that of a year at a glance. This effectively just has a mini calendar for each of the months of the year, and in terms of the spacing of these, each of those mini calendars is 8 boxes across, or 4 centimeters, and then 3 centimeters down, or 6 dot grid boxes. This allows enough space to have a header that has each of the initials for the days of the week, and then for the 8 boxes across, that's 7 for the days of the week, and then an additional one for the week number. The week number isn't essential, you do not have to include it. I personally just find it helps me to appreciate roughly when in the year we are. Knowing that we have 52 weeks in a year, I find it a little bit easier to judge how much of the year has passed based on week number versus just the date itself. Rather than writing out all of the mini calendars for this one, I decided just to print them off and stick them in. We do have free year at a glance printables in our resource library, which is linked in the description box if you wanted to nab those. Outside of the calendars themselves though, I just added a simple title for each of the months, and then we have a space at the top of the page which can be used for a header. The most typical way that a layout like this would be used would be just as a reference, so showing you what day of the week each of the days of the year fall on, and the date ranges for each of the week numbers. Normally for that style of layout, I'll just put the year number as the header, often not including the year at a glance part of that header. I just feel that having the year number is usually self-explanatory enough. Another way to use this style of layout though is as a schedule, so just indicating on the calendar using different colors when different happenings are going on. The key example I have here is based on a bin schedule, so when is the rubbish going out versus the recycling versus maybe the glass recycling. This will depend on how your rubbish system is broken down, but I've also used a layout like this previously for a term schedule. So when I was a teacher, indicating the staff only days, indicating when the holidays were, whether they be the term holidays or just public holidays. And I also used it to note when my sick days were, just so that I could keep track of my sick leave. Taking this header away though and getting out our next one, we can also use this style of layout as a log, with the example here being a contact log. This one can be used to keep track of the people you want to stay in contact with, whether that be using different colors for different people, or maybe using different colors for different styles of contact. Whether that be something like a text message, a phone call, an in-person meeting, especially if you find that you're not very good at keeping in touch with people. This is just one example of a log though. You could log other things. So for a specific category or area of your life, having different colors to represent different happenings or occurrences, and noting down when those things happen. I consider this one to be different to a schedule because a schedule is kind of decided upon in advance, whereas a log is something you would record after the fact. This would be the kind of layout that you'd come back to time and time again, and rather than using it as a reference page, more so using it as a tracker. Flipping that header over though, we have another tracker style idea, and that's using your year at a glance as a challenge tracker. In this one, your color code would indicate the challenge having been completed for the day or not completed, and you could either be tracking the same challenge across the entire of the year or making it month based. In that case, I would probably also go in and change out all of the headers for each of the months to have the name of the challenge or what challenge you are undertaking for the month. Or if you play around with your spacing a bit, you could probably fit both the monthly header and the challenge description. This one can be a really good layout if you're trying to build a particular habit or routine across the entire of a year, or if you just want a fun way to kind of gamify your goals and set yourself little monthly mini challenges associated with these. Before we look at our next super flexible layout idea, we have to thank today's sponsor, Tiefossi. If you're looking for your next notebook or fun journal accessories, then Tiefossi is very worth checking out. The notebook that we're using in this video to set up our flexible layout ideas is from their new floral cover collection, but I think that the best part about Tiefossi is that they really have something for everyone. You want page numbers? They've got notebooks with that. If you prefer no page numbers, then they've got notebooks without. If you like full cover designs, then they have some gorgeous options, but if you prefer simple and elegant icon styles, then they have those as well. My personal favorite at the moment are their Constellation collection, which offer 256 pages on 160 GSM paper, but the next ones that I'm eyeing up are definitely their Zodiac collection. Those ones have 100 GSM paper and the most gorgeous cover designs. If you wanted to nab yourself something from Tiefossi though, jump over to their website to have a snoop, and be sure to use code JashiiCorrin10 for 10% off your order. We love savings. The next layout structure idea we have though is that of a year in pixels. This one involves just writing a list of numbers 1 through 31 up the left hand side of the page to indicate all of the days in the longest months of the year. Along the top, going from left to right, we write out the initials for each of the months of the year. I've started this one at January, but depending on when you were setting up this layout, just start with whichever month you're going to be using it from. The outline that we do underneath this though gives us a space for each of the days of the year. So any of the months that have 31 days have their column go all the way to the bottom, but the line at the bottom doesn't go straight across because not every month has 31 days. Make sure to pay particular attention to February and how many days it has for the year that you're drawing out. And also remember that July and August both have 31 days, even though they're right next to each other. You can draw this one out as a full grid, but it takes a lot longer to do, so I just opted to do the outline. In terms of the extra space on the page though, the right hand side is great for a key, because as we have for all of the layouts in this video, this structure can be used in multiple ways. In terms of how this layout actually gets used though, each of the columns represents a month of the year, and then each of the rows represents the day number. For instance, this space here represents April 6th because it's in the April column and in the 6th row. I would typically fill this layout in with a dot marker, but really you can just use any kind of colored marker or a check mark, anything like that. But what these colors or markings mean really depends on what you're using the layout for. One of the ways to use this kind of layout is as a mood tracker. This is where each of the colored dots or markings represents a different mood that you had primarily in that day. This can be really useful for people who are trying to track how their mood fluctuates or changes across across the month, whether that be based on medication or other happenings. I've set the key up so that it's just a bunch of little emojis, but you could get a little bit more descriptive with this. You certainly have the space. While having a year in pixels as a mood tracker is one of the more common uses, it is by no measure the only one. So changing up our title and our key, we can turn this one into a habit tracker. On this one, we would use each of the colors to represent the status of the habit in question, so having the tracker record the progress of one habit in particular. I've used 3 colors on this one to represent a habit that has been completed, not started, and then started, but you could also use a symbol like a check mark to say that it's done, or a cross to say that it wasn't done. Taking off this header and key combo and switching it out for our next one, another way you can use this style of layout is as a log, and in particular I've gone with the idea of a leisure log. Of course the key on this one is very much going to depend on what type of log you're doing, but as a leisure log, this one would list out all of the different types of ways that you like to spend your free time, or things that spark joy that you just want to do more of, and then naturally, depending on the type of log, the title changes out as well. The way we use the layout though is exactly the same, so using the different colors to indicate what type of leisure you did. This could also be used as an exercise log, so listing out the different ways that you like to exercise. It could be a style of meal tracker where you indicate the main source of protein for your dinners or something like that. There are a lot of different options for this style, just depending on the things that you want to keep track of. The next way to use this layout is a little bit different, so we're actually going to have to change out the section on the tracker itself, and that's using a year in pixels as a don't break the chain tracker. This one again is used to track the completion of one thing in particular, but rather than using the color code to say that you did or didn't do it, you're using the color code to indicate your streak or your chain, how long you have successfully completed this thing day after day. Going with our key, the first color we have here is that peachy tone, and we would indicate how many days in a row we managed to complete this habit by just using that color up until the point where we break the chain. Once we get to a day where we did not complete that thing, we can either leave it blank or put it in with a different color to say wasn't completed on this day, and then we start on the next day that we successfully complete the habit with the new color. There's also enough space in the key section to indicate how long the chain went for or the date range for the chain, and the space at the bottom of the layout here could also be used for some statistics. It doesn't necessarily just have to have statistics for this type of use, you could also use statistics for the other ones we've looked at, so maybe percentages based on how many days you had certain moods or how many days you did certain types of leisure, or monthly statistics for how often you were able to complete a certain habit. This one has a really wide range of applications depending on the things you want to track and what you want to keep a record of, but flipping on over and onto our next layout structure, this one is a monthly calendar. Narrowing it down to just a few ideas of what you can use a monthly calendar for was quite difficult because really this layout is probably the most flexible in the lineup. We actually have a separate video on 30 something ways to use a monthly calendar, but in terms of the setup itself, the actual structure of this is going to change depending on the structure of your month. I've set this one up for a month that starts on a Thursday and has 31 days, or technically one that starts on a Wednesday and has 31 days, depending on whether you like to start your calendars on a Sunday or a Monday. I typically go with Monday start, so Thursday for this one. To draw out the monthly calendar though, we're just using vertical and horizontal lines so that each day has a box that's 3 centimeters across by 3 centimeters down, or 6 dot grid boxes either way. I typically structure mine so that I have 4 columns of days on the left hand side and only 3 on the right, mainly because I don't like any of the boxes going across the very center of the spread. I find it a little hard to write in there, and also because I'm right-handed, I find it more comfortable to write on the left hand side of the spread with there being 4 boxes over there, rather than trying to write on the very edge of the right hand page. Once all of the boxes for the calendar grid are in though, we just put a little header for each of those columns to indicate which day of the week they're for, and you can also put in a header for the column down the right hand side of the page, which can be used for additional information. The first example for how to use a layout like this is as a monthly log. If I were using it like that, I would be sure to title the page with the month's name, and then in terms of how I'd fill in the boxes, this would just be done by putting in the number for each of the days of the month, and putting in a summary of the things that I have going on. The extra space around the calendar grid can then just be used as decoration, and the space down the side here could be used as a monthly task list, or for notes, or any kind of brainstorming that you want to do. This is notably the most typical way to use a layout like this, but you could also use it for a meal log. In this one, I would just put in a little summary of everything I ate for the day and tying it to a little initial that indicates what meal it was for. If you've got enough space, you could also include a water tracker on this one, if that also relates to the reason that you're keeping this meal log in the first place. While I've ruled out lines to separate each of the sections in the box, you don't have to do this, but I do think it ends up making our summary look pretty cute. In terms of the panel down the side here, you could use that for tracking different metrics as related to your food intake, or you could use it for meal ideas either for what was going to be eaten this month or possibly next month. Notably, this structure that I've used is just one example of how you could include a meal log on here, and you could also use it as a meal plan instead, so going in ahead of time and noting down what you plan to eat for each of the days, rather than filling it in after the fact with what you actually ate. Pulling off that header and example though, and adding in our next one, you could also use a layout like this as a one-line-a-day page. Typically, one-line-a-day pages are set up as a full line of the notebook for each of the days of the month, but you can also capture this information on a layout like this too. It makes for a very fun memory spread, and I've done it for myself previously on layouts like this one, and it's just really fun to be able to play with different styles of lettering as well and make it a little bit more decorative. But you can just keep it simple like the example we have here, where you just use your regular writing and write in the boxes with what was going on. As for this one, the panel down the side could be used for things like monthly favorites, highlight memories, or even just fill it in with some kind of a picture collage. If a line a day isn't really for you, but you have a lot of people in your household that you're wanting to keep track of, then something like a shared calendar could be another alternative. In each of the calendar boxes, you designate one row for each of the people that you're keeping track of on the calendar. I've just used their initials here and then an A for all, so if you have any day plans that affect everybody that you're keeping track of, you don't have to write it down for every single individual person, you just put it in that last row. This one isn't necessarily super handy if the people in question need to refer to it, because it's probably in your journal, but more so just if you need to keep track of where everybody's going to be. Maybe if you're the person who kind of organizes the household, has to keep track of where everybody's going, because maybe you need to take them to these places. Having a combined schedule on a layout like this could be really useful. To avoid having to write too much of the same information repeatedly, you could use this side panel for a key, so if there are any kind of repeated happenings like clubs, sports practice, days that people are in or out of the office, maybe you could set up some initials or a color code that represents that and put that along the side. Just helps make the filling in process a little bit more streamlined. Another way to play around with color on this one is actually color coding the happenings so that they're related to each of the people you're keeping track of, especially if you don't necessarily have something happening on every single day for every single person. As said, the monthly log is one of the most flexible layouts that we have in this video, but flipping on over and we're on to another one, which I typically call the 8-box weekly. I'll give you 3 guesses as to why we're calling it that, but yes, we have 4 boxes on each of the pages, so 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom for each of those. In terms of the box dimensions, each of those is 6 centimeters across by 9 centimeters down, and this leaves a 1 centimeter space between each of the boxes, both vertically and horizontally. If we're thinking about those dimensions using the dot grid rather than centimeters, that's 12 dot grid boxes across and 18 dot grid boxes down. The gap is then 2 dot grid boxes. In terms of variation in this layout, not just thinking about the page itself and what kind of information it's capturing, but you can also get a lot of differentiation with this layout just based on how you're drawing things out. For instance, using different pen colors or pen weights. Are you doing a ruled line or are you doing it freehand? Is the line solid or is it broken, dotted? Or maybe instead of doing outlines for the boxes, you're just splitting each of the pages in half, both vertically and horizontally, with a single line in each direction. All of these little changes will still get you to the 8-box weekly, but it'll look different compared to the one that we have here. The same can be said for all of the layouts that we've had in the video so far. By playing around with different types of decoration and different styles, you can really make them your own. Probably unsurprisingly, the first way you can use a layout like this is as a weekly layout, so having a day for each of the 7 boxes here, and then maybe a note space or a mini calendar, or you could just use that space as decoration. The way you structure each of the boxes is very much up to you. This is just an example where we have events at the top and then a to-do list underneath this. I've just separated the 2 halves using a horizontal line, and you don't necessarily have to have Monday start here. You could have it start here and then have that notes section or mini calendar section in the top left. I mean, technically any of these boxes could be the bonus section, and then the other 7 are just left to be the days of the week. If you don't really like the idea of a bonus section, what you can can do is instead use all of these for daily boxes, so just starting the month with the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, through to the 8th, and then continue on to the next page. While a weekly layout is the most typical for this one, what you can also do is set it up for a goal plan. In this one, we wouldn't necessarily have the exact same layout in all of the boxes. Instead, I'd probably take at least 2 boxes per goal that I was working on. In one of the boxes, I'd have the little goal scaffold like we have here, where I outline what the goal is, why I'm working on it, and any of my metrics of success. And then in the box next to this, or possibly the one underneath it, I'd list out all of the actions that I have to take in working on that goal. Depending on how deep or detailed you want to get with this, you could in theory fit an entire goal plan in one box, especially if the goal is more of a short-term or a small kind of goal. Taking this one off though and getting out our next one, you could also use this layout for project planning. The example project we have here is an office makeover where you just list out all of the things that you need to do in working on that project, and you might need to use multiple boxes for the project depending on how many tasks you have to do. If you have a particularly large project, you could use each of the different boxes for a different aspect, kind of similar to what we have with this one here, where each of the spaces is like another module for the project. This one is related to a separate video we have on the channel, which is linked in the description box. Taking that card and flipping it over though, you could also use this kind of layout for a monthly review. In this one, each of the boxes would hold a different aspect of your review. I always like to start with achievements though, because it feels most positive. In terms of the other sections that you could include, we have a separate example for that. So things like wins, challenges, things that you did or didn't like in your journaling system, any improvements you want to make moving forward, memories, and really anything else you want to record. Obviously this isn't exactly the same layout, but you just take each of those headers and put them on the boxes that we have here. Hopefully this video has shown that despite the way that a layout is titled in somebody else's setup, doesn't mean that that's the only way that it can be used. When looking at new layouts online, make sure you're considering, can I tweak this so that I can use it for something I have a need for? And if you were looking for more layout inspiration, then this video is the next one to check out. In that one we have over 200 layout ideas for your next bullet journal setup, so click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.